This episode of the SwitchCast is produced by Chris Uhrig, our honored patron, and Switch King. Hi everybody, I'm Keith S.
And I'm Justin V.
And this is the SwitchCast, the podcast for the Nintendo Switch votary. And we have tons of stuff for you guys today. We have, as always, a jam-packed episode. We have game reviews, we have some news, and we have an in-depth community pulse with some feedback from the fans on some interesting Nintendo Switch topics to go over. And, how has your gaming been this week, JV? I hope that you've picked up your Switch again after. I know Monster Hunter's still probably tempting you, but I hope you've been able to get a little bit back into the swing of things.
You know, Switch is always going to be a part of my life, KC. So, yeah, I did definitely picked it up. I have two games that I'll be reviewing today, and I am excited to share them with everyone.
Yeah, a little secret inside knowledge here, everybody. We actually lost one of our reviews from last week due to a technical malfunction, and so JV is going to be reviewing for me again a review that we lost to the Aether last week.
Yeah, and speaking of technical malfunctions, it looks like I'm having to utilize a backup microphone today due to a physical technical failure on my end.
I know, that just stinks, because, we're recording later than usual, so I had to make an extra coffee, keep myself burning here for you guys, and
we're chugging along just for you all. It's going to be worth it, Casey.
Right. And chugging along. Actually, I've been playing something. I mean, I'm always playing my little side games, too, that are non-Switch based, and some people may know that I'm a avid pretty big fan of Pokemon Go and my group, and I know that you faded out, and a lot of people have, because, the game has some glaring flaws, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But I still play it, and I actually did show up on another podcast last weekend. Some of you may know my original co-host and podcasting brethren of Joey, who I did our first pod. The reason all of us know each other, me, JV, and Joey all, is from the Pallet Tribune. And Joey's been doing a new podcast called Level 5 Radio. It is a Pokemon Go podcast. It covers it all. And I showed up on there, and we talked for about an hour and a half about what we're doing in the game and some EX rates. And so if anyone's interested in that stuff and wants to hear me blather on for a while more, you can check that out also. That's on Apple Podcast.
Yeah, as expected, New York City is a pretty bustling place for Pokemon Go, so it's exciting to hear about that stuff.
Yes, very fun. And they've been doing a few interesting things. Like I said, I still think the game has huge flaws that need to be dealt with, but they've been making some solid efforts to create some fun events. So it's been keeping me going.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of events, this is the last week for Sun Worshippers contest. It's something that I really encourage you all to hop on the Discord and check out if you don't remember.
Yep. Just go on there and you can message at Sun Worshipper. You'll see in the general chat, there is we've pinned the criteria for the contest. You just have to message him your favorite moment from the show, and you have a chance to win some custom Joy-Cons and stuff like that. So
yeah, custom Joy-Cons, and we got a glimpse of some of them. They look really nice. I'm pretty jelly. And
what I've also got a glimpse at, and I do hope to read next week on the show, are some of the answers that people gave, or some of the submissions. And so hopefully next week the Community Pulse will be including a few of these favorite moments. And if I have time, I'll try to dig up some of the sound bites for people.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a ton of fun to hear about. I'm excited to see how it goes.
I'm a little nervous, actually, because I can imagine the things that people think are their favorite moments are.
It's going to be fun to reminisce a little bit, Casey.
Yeah. Well, let's go forward and move on to the game time and talk about some of the games we've been playing this week. Alright, so JV, you have gotten your grubby little paws on Dandara this week, and this is a game I was really excited to see ever since I checked it out at PAX last year. So do tell, how is the finished project of Dandara?
So I've always been wondering how to actually pronounce this. Is it Dandara, like it would be in Japanese, or is it Dandara, like, more typical American pronunciation?
I think it's a South American or a Latin American name, so I think it's just Dandara. It's neither North American nor Japanese.
I'm so culturally insensitive right now. Yeah, I've been loving this game. Dandara is an indie Metroidvania-style platforming game with a pretty unique twist on the typical platforming control scheme. Mm-hmm. If you look up a video or a trailer of this game, you can immediately tell that is what makes this game different from other Metroidvania games. So instead of the standard A to jump, B to run, X to attack style platforming game, Dandara utilizes a very different control scheme, where you're essentially attached to the platform you're standing on, and you move by slinging your Dandara character to the nearest wall or floor or ceiling.
Right, like she doesn't actually ever run either, right? She just only travels by launching from surface to surface.
That's right. You launch from surface to surface, and as strange as it sounds, the control scheme is actually super simple. So from wherever you are on Dandara's point, you aim with the left stick and you press A to sling to the direction you're pointing to, though there are only a specific set of surfaces you can stick to. So if there's a white wall, those white surfaces are what you can jump on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can even fire magical arrows by aiming the same left stick and pressing X. So you're always alternating between aiming to shoot and then aiming to sling yourself into the next platform. You can never do one or the other at the same time, so you are always really worrying about your position when you're fighting enemies.
Tell me if I remember correctly, does the perspective of the screen change depending on what surface you're on too?
So it does, actually. This game is considered quote-unquote directionless, where in some instances the walls are angled on the screen as if it's a floor, and if you're on a sideways position, it might shift and then become the floor again. It's one of those situations where the game is constantly reorienting itself just so that you really don't have any grasp of what's the ground and what's the ceiling.
Does that make it hard to find your way around the place? I mean, I feel like I'd get disoriented after a while and not remember, like, wait, did I come from up, or was up down when I came here?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I do have a bit of an issue with the map system in the game, and that the whole disorienting, reorienting aspect of the game really makes that element tricky. So you do have a map that you can reference, like with a standard Metroidvania-style game, and it lays out all available rooms and all the routes that you need to take to get there. However, due to the strange directional nature of the game, what's visibly down to you at the current position you're standing isn't necessarily the same as the position the map is displaying to you.
Okay.
Yeah, that it's tricky. So that means that while you may be upside down in a room, the map is still right side up, and you have to reorient the map every time, and that becomes a puzzle in and of itself. And that part is not necessarily an enjoyable aspect of the game.
Okay, I could see that being tricky.
But I do want to stress, like, that is really my primary negative with this game. The unique control scheme really informs what makes this game special, as opposed to a standard Metroidvania game.
Okay, so what else? Yeah, what else about it makes this a special or interesting Metroidvania?
Standard enemies that just stand on a platform and shoot at you become a pretty unique challenge, since you're really utilizing this new control method to quickly fling to the right platform at the right angle, giving you, a good enough position to shoot. So you're just essentially bouncing between different platforms like a ninja and getting into the right position to shoot and attack. And that feels satisfying a lot of the time. Overall, the control scheme takes a lot of thought at first, but once you get used to it, it becomes pretty second nature over time.
Okay, so you're going pretty fast with it, like you're able to jump and just instantly attack.
So sometimes if there's an enemy on your right side And depending on how the available platforms are laid out, you have to jump behind the person, then shoot your magical arrows to destroy them. And that's it's definitely fun. It can be frustrating at times, but if you embrace the different control scheme, that's you can have quite a bit of enjoyment with that.
Is it actually, there actually are like magical arrows? Is that what she's firing?
She essentially charges up a magical energy arrow beam from her hand and shoots out 3 arrow cone in front of her.
Okay.
And throughout the game, you're continuously collecting a resource called salt, which you use to buy upgrades at various camps around the maps. So the upgrades can range from health upgrades to firing capabilities, and that is how you would change the type of shot that you make. So you can have that triple arrows, which is default, or one bigger charged up shot to break through special walls, etc. And that's essentially how you customize the character.
Is there a reason why you're this girl jumping on walls, shooting fire arrows? Like, is there a storyline? Like, where are you? What is the context of all this adventure?
There is a story, but a lot of it is incredibly vague. I believe it's intentionally vague, and as you progress through the story, it becomes a lot more laid out to you. But right from the get-go, you're not really told anything. And even with the control scheme, it doesn't inform you that much about how everything needs to go. So far, I believe salt is the currency that you use to purchase things, but in this world, apparently it's a magical or super science material that is treasured by all these beings that see you kind of as a corruption, that type of situation. It's a bit fuzzy, and there aren't any long-running dialogues that explain everything. So it's something you'd have to slowly discover as you progress through the game.
So they kind of just drop you into the action, not really clear why you're in these flipping corridors and why you're exploring and gathering this power. Yeah,
the setting's kind of a mix between fantasy and modern, and it's really surrealist because you can see street signs and stop signs, but a lot of the enemies you encounter are like wolf people, and they're having fantasy armor and shooting beams at you. It's definitely a strange setting and a surreal atmosphere, which is definitely, it feels intentional.
Now, do you get in traditional Metroidvania fashion, are you acquiring new abilities to access areas? Like, do you actually learn new tricks as you go along the way?
Right, that's a good question. The progression of the game is pretty standard for the genre. So you're essentially exploring a fixed map and running around the map, finding camp checkpoints, then finding a boss that opens up a new ability that allows you to get to the next part of the map that you're not able to access. So,
like, what kind of abilities are those?
For example, what I described previously, you normally have the standard shot, the triple shot, but after a certain point, you can get a charge long single shot, which lets you break through certain walls.
Gotcha.
And breaking through certain walls opens up a new section, and then, it gives you more area to explore. So that is pretty standard for the genre. It has that similar cadence, and that's not necessarily a criticism of the game, I think, Casey.
I gotcha. And what about those bosses themselves? Are they, interesting? Are they fun? Like, how do they actually use this? I mean, I imagine they must really rely on this crazy mechanic that you rely on in order to make them different than normal, like, run up, slash a guy, run away, dodge attacks.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting take because a lot of the fights become more angular. For example, one of the early bosses, you are initially trapped inside of a square with a white surfaceable walls on each side, and the boss is in the center moving around, slamming at each of the sides based on where you originally were positioned. So you have to just quickly jump to the other walls while shooting at the boss, avoiding these fists that are slamming down at you. And in that sense, it kind of feels like one of those arena-style shmup games that we play a lot of, like Geometry Wars in that sense. So it becomes an encased boss fight. But then, after a certain point, it opens up, and then it becomes a scrolling boss fight where there's different platforms that you have to jump through in order to keep up with the enemy. And that feels really fast and cool, and it's not necessarily something that other games of the genre can replicate.
It feels very dynamic. All right, that's good.
Yes.
That they actually are capitalizing on this cool mechanic. That's cool.
Right. Yeah, so I can definitely see how some purists might not be a fan of the control scheme, because a lot of the times you're kind of fighting with it. Like, you want it to be able to quickly and easily get to a certain point, but the control scheme hinders you from doing that, and that might be frustrating to some people.
Right, I imagine it's a little bit of a reprogramming in the brain, because half the time I just want to walk to that thing that's like 5 feet next to me, but you can't just walk to it. You have to like bounce off 2 surfaces to get to something over there, and yeah, it takes a different mindset.
Yeah, and sometimes there's not even stickable surface. So while in a normal platforming you can just jump across trivially, in this game you can't get there because there's nothing you can stick to, so it doesn't even give you the option to jump there. So you have to solve the puzzle of moving around to the right position and then reorienting yourself to get to the right door to get to the next place. And that's part of the gameplay of it, but people can be frustrated by it.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see it.
And there are some situations where rooms and bosses that really spike in difficulty, and it's something that gets frustrating because of just how difficult it can be. But for me, at least, these Metroidvania games have that spike in difficulty pretty regularly, and it's something that I enjoy churning at least.
All right, cool. Anything else about the game that you want to bring up?
Overall, I really like the aesthetic. I really like how it's a unique twist on the game. It's not going to revolutionize the genre in any way, but it's a very solid entry in that type of game, and I recommend it for anyone who are already fans of the genre.
Very cool.
Yeah. I will add the caveat, though, since the map is really disorienting, if you're not a fan of the Metroidvania-style genre, it can be easy to get lost, and that can be a frustration that sometimes might even frustrate someone to put the game away.
I can see that, yeah. I mean, especially if the locations don't have very clear landmarks as to this is the way I came from, or, this is the way to the shop.
Right. It's not incredibly clear, but if you're already a fan of the Metroidvania genre, you know what you're looking for when you are given the world to proceed. You know you're looking for specific doors that you haven't touched yet and that type of stuff. So fans of the genre
that's a big part of this kind of
easily.
game, like being able to navigate a huge complex, going back and forth throughout the corridors and getting where you want to go. I mean, that's a big part of these kind of games. So, I mean, that is a fair thing to weigh about Dandara.
Yes, absolutely. So I would recommend it for people who are already fans of the genre.
Maybe like an experience or a real master of the genre won't even blink twice at that like challenge. Haha, I'm finding my way around the dungeons. I need a handicap to make it more interesting.
That's a good way to put it. It might even be considered a handicap, the whole orientation situation.
I mean, yeah, because that's a big part of it. It's like finding your way, knowing where you haven't gone, and getting there. Throwing one more little monkey wrench in that you have to be mindful of. Could add that challenge that some of these games generally tend to lack.
As another note, I actually really like how Dandara is designed, the character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's worth it. She has a scarf and an afro, and the way she stands and positions herself and lands on the platforms when you sling her, she exudes cool. So
it's good to have a good, a strong female lead in the game whenever we can get it. And do they characterize her at all? Does she speak? Do you have any personality development with her?
She's not characterized. She doesn't have that, she doesn't really talk or anything, but she does, just the way she holds herself, even in that pixelated form, I think is pretty cool.
Okay. It is fair to note, if anyone does think this character looks interesting, you can look up Dandara on Wikipedia, and it is an actual historic figure from the 1600s, and she is described, just to give you the start, an Afro-Brazilian warrior of the colonial period in Brazil. So there is an awesome story to read in here if anyone is wants to find out some of the inspirations behind this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely recommend checking that out too.
All right, cool. And going from one hero to a more fictitious one, The Longest 5 Minutes. This is the game I've been playing, and I was looking forward to this game for a while, knowing full well that it's the kind of game that I know it suits me perfectly, but people who are maybe like just casual RPG fans will actually really appreciate some of the things this game did.
Yeah, especially when this trailer came out for this game, I knew immediately that you would like this type of game. You have a history of liking these games specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the next evolution of Half-Minute Hero, which is still, like I said, one of my favorite games of all time, but they kind of maybe like toned back that theory that they went with in that game of like full RPG adventures condensed into this like super strict time limit. This still is a hyper sped up RPG, but not to that extreme. So Longest 5 Minutes is actually flips between two main gameplay modes. You will start the game off right off the bat as in kind of a choose your own adventure style gameplay where the premise is you are in a party of heroes facing the final boss. Like, you're already there. Like, you have had this adventure, and here he is, the Demon King, standing before you, and it's time for the showdown. But you have no memory of how you got there. You don't remember the people you're with. You don't know your special moves. Nothing. It's all blank, and you don't know why your memory's wiped, and neither do your allies. So you are trying to put together your memory while your allies are all just kind of like bugging out, like, oh no, we have to jog his memory or we have to hold him off. And this aspect of the game plays out, honestly, like a shonen manga.
Oh yeah? Really?
It really does. Like, there's a lot of those kind of tropes in that, like, okay, one of us needs to distract him for a while the other one charges up their finishing move to damage the guy, and you pick one of them, and it feels very Dragon Ball Z-ish like that. Yeah, no, basically, and people come out with like hidden save the day moves here and there. It's all played out very dramatically, but interspersed between these scenes of the battle, your memory gets jogged by certain things. Let's say even like the very basics, like who are these people, right? You're trying to remember their names, and like, don't you remember the time when we set out from our home village to begin this adventure? And then you'll flash back, and you'll play out an actual normal RPG kind of setting, right. A very self-contained section of the story. Now, these RPG parts of it are all extremely episodic in that you begin, you have a couple of goals to accomplish, like climb the top of this mountain, and then there might be a few little side quests, like help the fisherman and beat this minigame.
Okay.
Whatever you do in this, it doesn't carry over into anything else that you do. So in other words, you don't have to worry about necessarily like searching every corner, getting every item, building up XP, because when you finish that segment of the RPG game, that's it. Nothing else you did other than the, goals that you accomplished matter for anything else in the game, except for maybe like decisions. But every time you start another one of these flashbacks, you start with a preset amount of money, you start at a set level, and you have certain equipment.
Interesting.
It doesn't matter if you found, like, the legendary sword somewhere on some side quest in a previous chapter. You always start each one of these little flashbacks at a, at appropriate level. In fact, actually, you start at a pretty strong situation. Nothing in this game is particularly challenging.
That's actually really interesting because it really depends on how you like to approach RPGs, whether you enjoy that aspect of the game. Because some people like exploring and doing side quests to buff up their characters and be overpowered, but other people just like blazing through the story and not having to worry about being underpowered to progress through the tale.
Yeah. That's what I was saying before. Like, this is definitely a game for the latter of those two types of players. Because you're really encouraged to blaze through these chapters rather quickly. Battles go super fast. Like, you're walking through the field, enemies show up, and honestly, about 75% of the time, you can just press A and, attack, and you'll just wipe out the enemies. No big deal.
Right.
You have some spells. You have spells that'll wipe things out eventually, in one go. And you have enough MP that you really don't have to even conserve those. It really feels like the battles are just there to add the feel that you're in an RPG while not really making you stress out about how to beat anything. Even the bosses have not particularly been a challenging thing. Just use all your strongest spells on him. Maybe once in a while figure out a weakness or a good tactic, like, oh, I should, put reflect on me. But you'll beat them. And you get to the next plot point, and then that's really what it feels like the focus is, the next plot point.
So, listening to how you're describing the game, is there really any incentive to dig into any side quests available within an episode?
So there's the 3 goals. One is usually mandatory, and the other 2 are the side things. You do gain something called re-experience levels, and those goals, they give you big XP, and you get little nominal XP from the fights, but I believe that the re-experience levels that you gain are a permanent buff that you'll get across all the modes and across all the chapters. Though, honestly, I don't feel that they're something you really have to worry about because, as I said, they start you with every chapter more than ready to handle it. But you'll get a huge XP bonus for these side quests, and that's pretty much the only thing that carries over. And certain decisions that you make. I will note that you have a pretty cool cast of characters, and every so often you get a choice about what you want them to do. Maybe you want to send someone to go train or learn their signature move, or maybe you want to have a fill-in character. And some of those choices might affect future, who's in your party in the future there. But I do want to talk about these characters themselves. They are a pretty cool little cast. They start out almost like they feel like generics, right? You have your fighter girl with you. The main hero is just your typical hero. The wizard on your team is pretty cool because he's actually from a family of wizards, but he didn't want to do that, so he became a bard. So he's like this very metal character, and he's always like rocking awesome. Out, but he still knows magic because that was just with his family. So he's still kind of your wizard, even though he doesn't want to be a wizard. But yeah, he's got this, and you have like a priest girl who comes with you too, and they kind of develop them. Oh, right, and the wizard's name is Regent Night Fever. I just think that's awesome.
That is an epic name.
And there's a pretty good supporting cast. And there is even a overarching villain story. The interesting thing is, though, that the villain himself, the Demon King, knowing nothing about him, and you almost will write him off as just a generic last boss.
Right.
I'm nearing the end, and I'll just say that they do finally now are starting to develop who this enemy is, and that he's not just a generic, which was what my biggest fear was playing through most of this game. But he is kind of coming into his own as why I care about this fight and why it feels it should be epic enough.
So I really like the structure that this game describes because it's a unique take on the RPG. It's kind of like Memento in the sense that you're starting at the end and you're trying to build your memories back up in the middle of the action, and that's a unique take.
I love this as a storytelling device. It adds a lot of weight to like things in a normal RPG. Like you might have like a little sit-down conversation that sets something up that might pay off hours later, which is really good. But in this, they do it the other way around. It's you're in a dire situation, and maybe someone had a plan for exactly that, or they had an item to help them overcome this very specific challenge in the final boss fight, and you don't know that solution exists until you flash back and then you see, oh, right, he got this amulet to protect him from just this kind of attack. And then you go right back into the final boss fight where, he's about to use that. But the real cool stuff that happens, and this is only, I'll say it's a slight, it's not really a spoiler, but it's a slight cool twist that starts happening in the game.
Okay.
Is that some of the decisions you start making in your flashbacks start having live changes in what's happening in the now, in the final boss fight. And it's confusing even to the hero himself. So things change based on how you remember things.
It's not that there's anything that passes on between each episode. It's that all the changes within the episodes are affecting your character in the final big showdown.
In fact, I believe there's even a thing where there are multiple endings to this game, and you're encouraged, and there's even a thing where you can go back to certain chapters and change what you said or change what you do, either in the RPG or in the visual novel aspect of the game, as I'll call it. And it will lead you to different stories. In fact, I can see they list all the chapters that you could see in the game, and there's certain chapters I haven't seen because of decisions I've made. And so there's all sorts of different ways you can go, and I think there might just be like 2 or 3 different endings at the end, but I think that's kind of an interesting aspect, is trying to piece together what I have to do in order to like unlock certain endings to it.
Now, with that considered, how long is each individual chapter? Is the game pretty short or long?
Yeah, I think overall the game is about 10, 15 hours.
Wow, that's longer than I expected.
Yeah, okay. Each of the chapters are perfect sized for a game on the go. I think this is highly well adapted as an RPG for a portable player, in that you can probably play a single scene in about an hour or less.
Okay.
And just kind of charge through it, depending on how much time you want to spend on some of those side missions. Some of them are a little more annoying than others, and might take a little more time, but you can always go back and try them again if you want to like redo a level. Gotcha.
Okay. Overall, this sounds like a really interesting take on the genre. It sounds refreshing to me, to be honest.
No, I think it's a beautiful idea. I think they executed it well, and they turned what is kind of ostensibly a generic RPG cast into some decently memorable characters, and I like them. And it has even some pretty good music. The only thing I'll just warn people about is that this is a game for someone who's really concerned with the plot, is not looking to play an RPG for the combat, for a challenge. They just kind of want the experience in a very truncated, super streamlined form. Okay.
Well, it sounds like it has its specific audience set up for it.
I do want to note one thing, is that it does also kind of have a bunch of those anime overtones where like there is an entire chapter, it's a short one, but there is one chapter of the flashbacks that's about visiting a bath's
house,
and one of the characters wants to go peeping.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's a pretty well-known anime trope. That's
and it has a lot of those kind of things. Like there's some just pure funny like tropes thrown in there, but they threw in a handful of the pervy stuff in there too. So
at the very least, it looks like the graphics are pixel art, so there's nothing too lewd that can be seen.
Oh no, you won't see anything like that. Though they do mix in. I'll say though, the final boss scene has the higher res graphics in the background and the character there, even though your character's in pixel art, but they do have some beautiful character art for their signature moves when they do their finishers, and a few certain scenes show like full art renditions of the characters that look really nice, and they're a nice touch in there too. So it's overall well done for a game that's all about cutting corners and being super streamlined. They did not cut corners with the actual delivery of this game, so I was very happy with it, and I do want to finish it, and I feel like in a game this short, with so many games that are going to take me 60 plus hours to beat, it's really kind of refreshing to have one that I feel I can finish in a week or less.
Right, yes, that's definitely something that we, as reviewers, can value separately.
Yes. All right, so that was longest 5 minutes.
It's really interesting that so far we've been talking about games that take a genre and subvert one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other game that I wanted to review today, it's a little bit of the opposite of that. So the game I'm talking about is Tachyon Project, and Tachyon Project is a pretty standard arena twin-stick shooter that obviously pulls really heavily from previous iterations of the genre. So it's very similar to something like Geometry Wars or Super Stardust HD.
Mm-hmm.
So the fundamental gameplay is almost exactly what you would expect from this type of game. You're a ship inside of a rectangular arena, and you fly around the arena shooting at waves of enemies that become increasingly more difficult as you progress through the levels, and so on and so forth. It's a pretty standard gameplay loop for the twin-stick shooter genre.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of bosses that change up the structure a little bit, and it is fun trying to figure out how to beat each individual boss. So that is something that this game retains and does pretty well. Now, one aspect that does kind of set it apart from something like Geometry Wars is that you do have quite a bit of control over how your ship actually works. So in between each level and whenever you die, you have the option to customize your ship's primary weapon, their sub-weapon, and their passive capabilities. And so that's something that, is different from the more set capabilities that the ships have in the other games of the genre.
What kind of passive abilities can you get?
So there are 2 passive ability slots, which you can use to enhance your ship's health, change the properties of your ammo, increase your movement speed, and there's even 2 sub-weapon slots, which you can fill with explosives that can kill all enemies in an area. You have ones that freeze all the enemies on the screen, and ones that stop time. So you have a bunch of customizability there, and this allows you to essentially mix and match different combinations based on what you need at the time and based on what enemies you're facing. And because of that capability, I actually found myself changing up my loadout pretty often whenever I get stuck at a boss or a difficult enemy or a specific wave that was really hard to overcome.
I gotcha. Is this like a multiplayer, or is it a solo only?
So I did enjoy that this is a multiplayer game. It allows for 4-player local multiplayer, and you're all playing simultaneously on the same screen. So that's a ton of fun to do. It does allow you to customize your loadouts, but the problem with that is it's a shared loadout for everyone else. So everyone shares the same loadout, and if the loadout doesn't really fit your style but fits someone else's, there might be a bit of friction there. It might not feel ideal for you. Then again, on the same vein, you can potentially talk as a team to figure out a loadout that works for everyone. But that's something that I don't necessarily feel is a big plus or minus towards the game.
Yeah, it's just a weird choice to make, that everyone has to kind of use the same system of weapon system.
The same weapon system. Yeah, exactly. Now, overall, the enemy variety is pretty standard for the genre also, since a lot of them are honestly just variations of units that continuously move towards your ship. It's either, a unit that moves towards a ship in a weird way, or a stationary hazard that shoots out other enemies. It's not incredibly diverse, though they were able to consistently output a different type of enemy throughout each level.
I get you. When I look at the screenshots of this game, I can practically see techno music playing. Is that the music that is playing in this game?
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. I mean, it's pretty standard for the genre, again, to have techno music, but this is techno music on loop.
Okay.
It's definitely trying to evoke a, techno cyberpunk attitude, because it is essentially part of the story of this game. So one of the unique elements of this game is that it actually has a story a little bit. And you don't really see that in standard shooters of this type. Since the music and the techno really is trying to evoke a cyberpunk world, it actually is set in a cyberpunk world where there's a pair of hackers that have created an AI that threatens a government official, and that causes them to be traced and kidnapped. Okay. So because of that, the AI, I believe she's named Ada, is out on a quest to find her kidnapped hacker parents, and the hacker parents are somewhere out there, and that's kind of the mystery that Ada's trying to solve, and she's hacking multiple corporations and organizations to find further information. The story is really silly, Casey.
It is the most techno story I've ever heard, too.
Yeah, right? Oh, an AI is out there trying to hack into corporations to find their hidden hacker parents. It's not great. It's very silly, and the story itself is only presented through text and still shot cutscenes between each level. Mm-hmm. And the writing itself is honestly pretty awful. It's written like a middle school fan fiction writer who's super obsessed with Blade Runner.
Okay.
I saved a couple quotes, literal quotes from the game, just so I can recite them to you, Casey.
Okay, I'd love to hear this.
Some of them are presented like, "What I found digging in these companies I didn't expect. None of them are what they seem. They all employ people who work for this company. That's sort of okay, but this is weird. They're very well paid, too. Actually, these companies seem to be losing money. This means their money is coming from somewhere else." Like, everything is statements, and they're really expecting you to follow it, but it doesn't mesh together. There's no real personality.
Just let me shoot things is what you're thinking, right?
Yeah,
the whole time.
It seems superfluous and unnecessary. And what's even worse is that while you're in the arena shooting around, they sometimes pop up dialogue that the AI is supposedly saying while she's hacking into a corporate server. And that actually is distracting and hinders from your ability to see everything.
All right. So overall, though, did you enjoy the game?
Yeah. Overall, the gameplay is about as fun as you expect for this genre. Okay. And that multiplayer aspect is always welcome for this type of game.
But where does it stack in the genre against others?
For $10, the overall experience is... it's worth it. I enjoyed it. Because I am a fan of this genre. We've been mentioning that a lot of games are tailored to a fan of the genre. And while something like Longest 5 Minutes is really working to subvert the genre, and it might not appeal to fans who are typically JRPG fans, this game is very much in the twin-stick shooter arena genre, and I think would appeal to people who already like that gameplay.
All right, very cool. Oh, you just reminded me of something. One other cool little feature, though, about the Longest 5 Minutes that reminded me is during the last boss scene, there is a 5-minute timer counting up. Well, it's counting, we assume it's going up to 5. It's a good way to know how far you are in the game. It's
that's a good point.
I know I'm nearing the end because I just passed the 4-minute mark. And I'm like, well, I'm in the last minute of the game.
That's a good point.
Things have to be wrapping up soon. It's like, only got, I got 30 seconds left, but this is going to wrap up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like it. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of how recent Dragon Ball Super episodes are. There's a tournament where it says, oh, this whole tournament is going to be set in 24 minutes, like 48 episodes ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so each episode counts down by a minute, and things have happened that are way longer than a minute. So
yeah. It's kind of like watching 24.
Yeah. It's really weird how things play with time nowadays.
All right, let's switch over into the news rundown and get that out of the way.
Yeah, let's do it.
News rundown, and here are your headlines.
So I definitely want to start off this news section with something I really was surprised by. And this is the Nintendo Labo Toy-Con Garage.
Yeah, this is real. I did not expect this, but I guess I should have in retrospect.
Yeah, absolutely. So apparently there is a feature called Toy-Con Garage with the Nintendo Labo that the inbuilt software feature works like a basic programming tool, enabling you to take functions of the Toy-Con and combine and tweak them to suit whatever idea is floating about in your imagination. Fascinating, because, if you don't know me already, I used to be a Lego robotics instructor quite many years back, and I used to teach Lego Mindstorms to kids around 9 to 12. And this type of basic programming tool, really inspired those kids to, get into the whole programming concept, build things physically, and then use any programming tool we have to make them come to life based on what they're imagining. And I thought that, and I didn't really expect Nintendo Labo to have that level of freedom behind it.
Yeah, I thought there might be just some... Actually, the first thing I thought they would do was make a thing to design your own toy cons themselves, not the games for them, and not to actually involve programming. And I've always said that I feel that programming skills, that's something that's seriously lacking from the education system, at least here in the US. And I feel that should be way more standard for everyone to learn really early on, just, the way society is now.
Right, even fundamental programming concepts. You don't necessarily need to want to be a programmer in the future. It's something that you can take with you with, when you're problem solving a situation, when you're assessing and criticizing what you need to do. It's just good to have in your back pocket when thinking through things, since programming is often a logical situation.
I feel like, a generation ago, it was everyone was taught to, know how to do basic stuff on your car, like, change the oil, tweak the defibrillator, jazzy stick changing, and strut your shocks, whatever. Those are car words, right?
Yeah, right.
So you're supposed to do all that stuff then.
Sorry, I feel that listening to this podcast.
I feel that this is the next generation's necessary knowledge base, and we did a lot of what people said was this is something that we expected to be used in an educational setting. I think that just took it from maybe a cute little craft activity to something that might pass on some actual important knowledge.
Now, I actually really like the fact that Toy-Con Garage allows you to use your own cardboard parts in order to make whatever creation you're making.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily limited to the kit that's provided to you by Nintendo. If you have any other cardboard pieces, you can use that in order to make something that your kids might want to play, or even yourself.
All right, so next on the docket, this is actually a source of our topic for the Community Pulse today, but there was an interesting tidbit in last week's Nintendo's financial report, or their presentation, where they spoke about the future of DLC in their games, and they specified that they want to go pretty much double down on this, go even harder into downloadable content in the future. And I quote, "To promote longer gameplay for individual software titles, we plan to implement even more downloadable content and events that build excitement for games." That was from Nintendo President and CEO Tatsumi Kimishima. And I mean, it's been working for them so far. Right. And I know that most of the general opinion seems to be pretty positive towards how they've been handling it. So maybe they can get away with it more than, let's say, other companies out there have been handling this sort of thing lately.
Yes, and this is a topic that we're going to go deeper into within the next Community Pulse coming up. So I'd like to elaborate on my thoughts on it then. Yeah,
but anyway, so that's the setup for that, is that they are going to be, so we're probably going to see even more DLC season passes. And, it's funny though, they didn't specify in this quote whether they meant specifically paid DLC or if it just meant more updates in general. I mean, like Splatoon has had 100 different little updates here and there. Same with ARMS. None of it was paid DLC. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're totally focusing on just these, season passes for $15-$20 each.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, I want to get your opinion on this next one.
Apparently, a bunch of hackers were finally able to get Linux running on a Nintendo Switch. So we've had screenshots of Linux running on a Switch, And apparently it's utilizing an exploit that might not be patchable by Nintendo.
Is that possible? Like, yeah, maybe you could explain to me how that would be. Like, is there some flaw that's so deep that it's just something you can't patch? Is that a thing?
You know, it's very difficult to dig into something like that and be able to put out an exploit that's not patchable. It's something that I'd really have to look into, and I feel like I believe it's Fail Overflow, the people or person who is working on this Linux exploit. They're not going to divulge necessarily what they did to get this going, unless they can replicate it and ensure that it's something that's unpatchable as they claim. So it's hard to say how this comes out with a Switch, but I think it's really cool tech. I think it's a really cool accomplishment. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of homebrew on consoles.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played anything homebrew, honestly. Maybe since the Wii, I tried some of it out, and it just was cute, but I didn't really feel like it was a thing that I wanted to delve too much into.
Well, the biggest homebrew benefit on the Wii was Project M. That was spawned because of the homebrew capabilities of the Wii, and that I think is a really big benefit to the homebrew community. Though ultimately, a lot of the reasons why people homebrew are because of piracy. Though it's
what was Project M again?
Project M was the Super Smash Bros. Brawl fix that a really grassroots community of developers made using the homebrew system in order to make Brawl less like Brawl and more like Melee.
Okay. So maybe it's fair to look at this as, even if this does work as a platforming for homebrew in the future, it would probably need a champion title or update or something like that to really make it a desirable
to look into.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not knocking people who utilize homebrew. There are a lot of really fun, legitimate reasons to use it. But for the Nintendo Switch, I feel like the primary reason people want to homebrew would be to plug in emulators and pirate. And due to the sheer number of indie developers that are releasing for the Switch, I want to make sure that they get, they get what they deserve funds-wise, and they get their compensation for developing for this console.
Yeah, it's reasonable. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
All right, in the updates world, we have, first off, ARMS version 5.1 has added a few new features, and this is after Nintendo said there were not going to be any major updates to ARMS, so this is actually a pretty good update considering that. Most notable was the tournament mode, which was added to this. So this is a mode where all the ARMS are unlocked already. So I think what we were talking about a long time ago with worrying about some people having access to combinations or the upgraded ARMS that might give someone an advantage, this kind of alleviates all that. So you could play competitively and just have access to everything that you would want for the strategy you wish to employ.
Right.
Also came with some new badges based on certain battles that you can, if you get into certain fights over and over again. And the next Party Crash, which is Springtron versus Kid Cobra. That's this weekend.
I'm totally voting for Springtron.
It also looks like in the update they added in a comeback feature so that if you're in a room where one side is thoroughly getting pummeled, you'll get extra points, up to 50% to double, for choosing that underdog character and helping them make a comeback.
On the Splatoon 2 front, it looks like we're getting the Bedazzled .96 Gal Deco. So it's a rapid blaster, which has the sub-weapon Splash Wall and the Splashdown Special. So I actually really like that combination, since Splash Walls give you a defensive option, while Splashdown gives you both an offensive and defensive capability as well. So
I've never gotten too much good use out of that wall. Maybe I have to master a little bit more, but I feel like it's one of those things that I've never been able to utilize properly.
I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure if it's like a meta sub-choice. I haven't really seen the meta recently, but whenever I played Splatoon 2 more regularly, it's something that I really liked using when there are certain choke points to get to like a splash zone.
I getcha. And we have Voice Update 1.4 now live, and just adds another 14 songs, keeping them coming for that rhythm
and that's
game.
totally free, right?
That's all free, so...
Yeah, it's so impressive that they're just adding more content, even without charging for them.
Yep, just keeps coming in, and now that the game, you can play it in docked mode since the last update, and so that's definitely worth trying out if you haven't picked that up in a while.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell us about the new releases, JV.
All right, so today on February 8th, we have Arcade Archives Crazy Climber, Mercenary Saga Chronicles, which kind of looks like a bit of a mix between Final Fantasy Tactics and Fire Emblem. There's Atomic Run Gun Jump Gun, Disc Champ, Hyperion Cyberstorm, Aegis Defenders, and Neo Geo 2020 Super Baseball. On February 9th, we're getting Dragon Quest Builders, which is the Dragon Quest version of Minecraft, which looks pretty cool. There were a few concerns that there's no multiplayer in this, so that's something to keep in mind. And on February 13th is The Fall Part 2 Unbound, The Longest 5 Minutes, which we talked about. Monster Energy Supercross, the official video game, and Owlboy, which... I don't know if we mentioned this in the last podcast, but Owlboy had a bit of controversy recently.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, if you don't remember, the Owlboy people had submitted a really ugly, disgusting icon for the Nintendo Switch. It was essentially a pixelated version of the Owlboy face, but offset to the bottom to the right, and it looks not great. They're fixing the icon, and it looks gorgeous again, but... it's interesting that Switch fans are really, really picky about how the icons look on their Switch.
That one did look that one looked like they just accidentally picked the wrong file and they got some like random sprite.
Yeah, it's a sprite of Owlboy's face in a white background, blurry onto the bottom right. So it's off-center, blurry, and glaringly bad. So I'm glad they fixed that. That would bother even me.
So down the pipe, these are games that were announced to be coming for the Switch this year, but we do not have a solid date yet. Starting with Seven Nights, which is a mobile RPG that's coming over to here. Fox and Forest, which is a pretty standard platformer with some anthropomorphic characters. SteamWorld 2 Dig is getting a physical release with a few extra goodies coming along.
Yeah, that's a very well-received indie game that a lot of our Discord people recommend and love.
Yes. Smoke and Sacrifice. This is actually pretty cool. This is a survival sim. It kind of looks like... It plays similar to games like Crashlands or Don't Starve. I mean, it's like a dark situation. You're a mother trying to find her child, and it has like an Asian steampunky kind of feel to it. But yeah, pretty sick-looking survival game. There's a series of these zero-div classics. These are just some old. A couple of them are side-scrolling shoot-'em-up games, and one action platformer. They are called Samurai Aces, Soul Divide, and Tizen Hot Gimmick. These three games kind of fit into like the Neo Geo genre, I feel like. Town of Light is another horror-themed game set in the psychiatric wards of...
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, let's say like the early 50s, where like people really weren't treated too well there and kind of made more people insane than cured anybody. Followed up right with Layers of Fear, which is another first-person psychological horror game. Oh, you are an insane painter in this game, and you're bent on finishing your masterpiece.
Okay, that's... psychiatric wards are always a really good and creepy setting for horror games. Claws
of Furry is a 4-player co-op brawler game with little cat people. Physical release of Brawlout is coming. We got Raging Justice, another brawler game.
Raging Justice!
Yeah. Nico Para, which is a visual novel, which I'm glad to see making their way. I would like to see some less fan servicey ones, but I'll take whatever progress we can make in this field. This one takes place in a world where the world is populated by both humans and cat girls.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You can figure where that's going.
Fan service.
There's another one that looks even more fan servicey called Song of Memories. This is another, this one has to deal with some music group and a virus that's wiping out the world, and you're trying to save some of these girls from it while you're
and it looks like
them.
There's some pretty risque artwork going on.
This one is heavily in the fan servicey one. I didn't think I'd have to say this, but the one with the cat girls looks a little tamer.
That's interesting.
Another smartphone game called Fishing Star is making its way over, followed up by Castle of Heart, which is a side-scrolling action night game. Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire. Oh, you've played this or you've seen this?
No, Pillars of Eternity is a huge game. It's a huge Diablo-style game. A lot of people play on the computer, and some people prefer it over Diablo 3.
It looks pretty cool. It goes over a lot more variety of landscapes than Diablo, I'll say.
That's awesome. Okay. I definitely want to check this out because it is a Diablo clone from a well-known development company in Obsidian. So this is something to look into a bit further, Casey.
Very cool, very cool. I was pretty interested in this trilogy of Vengeance. These are 3 different games, all made by CyberConnect 2, and I like hearing about them bringing stuff over to Switch because they are the ones behind the .hack series of games. So I would love to see them make a foray here and maybe eventually bring some more .hacks going on. But these are 3 different games, though all looks like they're set in a similar, if not the same world. One is a strategy RPG, one is a high-speed /action game, and the other one is a 2.5D side-scrolling, ultra-fun witch action game with gothic Lolitas.
The artwork is super edgy. I like that they describe each game in their trilogy in 3 separate words.
Yes,
One is war, vengeance, kimono. The other is schoolgirl, vengeance, steampunk. And the last one is gothic Lolitas, vengeance, witches.
The Wardrobe and Detective Gallo are a pair of point-and-click adventure games coming from Mixed Bag and Adventure Productions.
Cool.
Muse Dash, really cool looking rhythm action game with, very J-poppy kind of music, and sounds like there's some Vocaloids in there.
Yeah, the gameplay kind of reminds me of Harmonite, which is right?
Yeah, kind of along those lines. Typo Man, which is really weird but awesome. It's a game about you're a dude made of letters, and it is a side-scrolling action puzzle game, I want to say, in where words that you come across in the stages can be edited and played with to change their meaning and do stuff. Like in the trailer, you'll see there's a word.
This one's a cool instance of that wordplay. You're walking around and you see the word part, and it looks like a pretty standard thing in the background.
Like a part that you need to fix something.
Right. And then it quickly shifts into trap and attacks your character. And it's an interesting wordplay. I like it.
Yeah. So there's things like that, and you'll try to edit things on the fly in order to turn them into something that will help you rather than hurt you. And Caro Blaster. This is one of my favorite mobile games that I played a while back. It's by the same developer as Cave Story, and this is one where it sheds that whole shell of the exploration Metroidvania aspect. It's just a pure side-scrolling action game with stages, but the same kind of gun system, and you're this weird detective frog guy, and it just has really good boss battles, and it's that same great graphic style and cool music that I'm going to use as the bumper for this section.
So do you remember when we interviewed the developer of this game for Pocket Players a long time ago?
Oh, yeah.
That was in PAX East.
Yeah, that was at PAX East a few years back by now. That was a while ago.
A long time ago. That's cool. It's cool that it's coming to the Switch.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited. I'm highly recommend this, and I'd play it again. Yeah. And unconfirmed, but some rumors. We got games, The Room and Amnesia. I never played The Room, but I know Amnesia is a classic, super scary horror first-person action game.
Yeah.
Sonic All-Stars, the kart racing games, that is been spoken of as a possibility. Some hints that that's very likely.
And it's actually been pretty well received as well. Sonic All-Stars is a game that a lot of people compare to Mario Kart, and some even compare it favorably to Mario Kart.
Interesting. All right. I'll give it a fair shot. And Bandai Namco had a couple of little possible reveals. Ridge Racer 8 is suspected to be coming, as well as another unidentified IP for a shooter game.
Ridge Racer!
Community Pulse! Let's go! All right, so before we dive into the main question, I wanted to read a direct question that was sent to us by our Switch King of the episode, Chris Uhrig, and he asked us for this Community Pulse. The Pokemon Switch release is already proving to be one of the most anticipated games for the system. Besides the main series titles, what other Pokemon games would you like to see come to the Switch? I personally would love to see Pokemon Coliseum from the GameCube on the Switch. I really enjoyed being able to use Umbreon and Espeon as your starters, and the aspect of snagging Shadow Pokemon was cool. Thanks, love the show.
Oh, that's a good question. We both have a special spot in our hearts for the Pokemon franchise.
cannot deny it.
I would steer a bit clear from like the Pokemon Stadium style games, because 3D Pokemon is already readily available in the palm of our hands through the 3DS. So, maybe I would actually really like a sequel to Pokemon Snap.
That was actually the only game I would say I was going to bring over would be Pokemon Snap, because I really don't need any of the other games brought over to Switch. I just want them to focus on new combat, Pokemon games, right? If it's a game where you're playing an RPG and you're battling or anything like that, I just want a new one. I don't need any of the old ones brought back, whether it's a mainline or side. Snap was so different and so fun and just fits that relaxing vibe that I eat up on the Switch. I would love another chance to dive into that one.
Yeah, and okay, this might be I wouldn't say controversial, but it'd be a weird choice. I would want Pokemon Rumble to be brought back.
Okay.
But I would like for them to add a lot more depth to that gameplay.
Yeah, I get it.
Because I liked the Diablo-style dungeon crawling aspect of it, and I liked being able to collect the Pokemon and play as them. I just wish it was more than just a button-mashing, two-button game.
All right, fair enough.
So if they add more depth to that fundamental base gameplay and allow for people to share Joy-Con to make it a co-op experience locally, it's it's something that I would enjoy playing or hopping into.
So the main question I asked the community this week was to grade how you feel Nintendo has handled DLC on the Nintendo Switch this past year, and what they feel about their plans to up that effort this year. So why don't we read a couple of these responses?
So Federico de Obeso said, I think it's great. Zelda DLC was awesome, and when you love a game, you always want more. Of course, this comes with a price tag, but I would have spent that money on another game that I probably won't enjoy as much as the DLC.
Fair point.
I do agree that if a DLC is handled well, like the Champion's Ballad, that gives enjoyable content, sometimes you might value that DLC even more than a full game that you won't really enjoy quite as much. So,
yeah, because there's some people who don't play that many different games. You find one game and then you're just always wishing there was just a little bit more or just something else and enjoy out of it. And definitely that could be worth another $15-$20 just to, extend that one game you like rather than buy something else that you'll be like, well, I just needed to buy something.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a good way to approach DLC, especially when it's done well.
Though there are some contrasting opinions here. Benjamin Leville wrote, honestly, I think Zelda's DLC was the worst pack of DLC I've ever paid for. I don't think it should have been more than $15, and I think that's pushing it.
Yeah, well, everyone is allowed to have their own opinions about DLC or specific bundles of content. I would definitely love for you to elaborate a bit further on what you didn't like about the Zelda DLC, Benjamin. That'd be an interesting discussion to have if we can keep it as respectfully as possible. So, Daniel Malik said, solid B, maybe B+. I really don't mind DLC in general. I've been weaned pretty well over the past decade of Xbox and PC gaming, but the evil DLC models have always irked me. I don't have a problem with actual content a la Breath of the Wild or Fire Emblem Warriors, or even unnecessary but fun bonuses like Xenoblade, where, like the Bana War contributions, etc. They mostly seem like fun additions to otherwise complete games, and that's totally okay. The kind of DLC I have a problem with is on-disc DLC, content that was ready to go when the game shipped, but they just decided to charge extra money for it. I can definitely agree with that. That's definitely DLC that I would not be as okay with. If it's something that's on the disc and they withheld it just so they can make money, that's less consumer friendly than if the DLC was made after release and intended for, and only distributable through downloadable content.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew Epperson wrote in, Nintendo, unlike some publishers, releases full games, and their DLC is always an optional extra. So they are definitely doing DLC right. Only company that does, in my opinion. I think that's the only way that people are going to stay positive about this is if they keep that feeling that they're releasing a full game, not holding stuff back. And it's a tricky psychological thing, honestly. Like, there's still people I know that have messaged us saying that they didn't like Zelda simply because there was the existence of DLC, and that made them feel like they weren't getting the full game, even though I very strongly felt that they separated it well, and it didn't feel like it was part of the main game. It really was a separate, enjoyable addition.
That's been a recurring sentiment with our community. It looks like a lot of people feel like the games that Nintendo are offering are full experiences right off the bat, and the DLC is just there to extend the experience if you want to do so. I feel like that is really the way that DLC should be. I agree with everyone that that's a good sentiment to have. And, Nintendo's been doing well overall.
Yeah, now, and especially the thing, I'm hungry even for the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 DLC, that I haven't even done it yet. But I totally plan to play it because that is just a game I'm going to feel like you. I'm going to beat it. I'm going to feel like I want more. I will pay to extend that experience any amount.
Right, absolutely. And considering I've already beaten it a while back, I'm actually itching for the new game content that's going to come out in a month or two. So the new game plus content, which I'm excited for.
Yeah. And I mean, did you buy the Zelda DLC?
No, I did not.
Yeah, neither did I, but I never felt that I was like, now I'm missing out on something that I needed to experience. I was like, no, I beat Zelda and I felt content. And
right, the fact that I didn't get the DLC but still feel content with a game is a good sign that the DLC is handled well.
I mean, there's so much content I doubt that we even got to, since there's so many places we could still hit up and explore, and shrines to complete even.
Yeah, and pair our contentness with the game with people's positive sentiment towards the DLC means they handled that situation pretty well in general. And I feel like if Nintendo takes that sentiment and plans out all future DLC to be on the same vein, they're going to be set up for success on this front.
I'll take it as a warning for companies like what they're doing with BlazBlue, with only like half the roster being available and everyone else being sold in little DLC packs. That's the kind of the scary ground, you know?
Yeah, it's honestly a little. It's they want to monetize it, and I believe MOBAs do that. You know, whenever there's a full game like League of Legends or Heroes of the Storm, and a new character comes out, that character is available for purchase. I just don't think it works in the fighting game genre.
But you know, most of those MOBAs, you're playing for free, and then you pay for the characters if you know, at least that starts out as a completely free game, and then they, you know, have the free rotations usually, and then you pay to, like, permanently access them. So, you know, considering it starts out free, that's a little more acceptable with that model.
Right, and on the opposite end of that situation, Overwatch, where you have the initial buy-in, but all the characters that come out are free afterwards. I feel like those are acceptable routes to take.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. Wanted to give one last shout out though to a poll we did a couple weeks back. I was curious, since we mentioned the Labo again this week, what people feel about the Labo, how they like it, dislike it, and whether they're going to buy it or not, and contrast that with what their personal opinions on it are. And I think this is interesting, actually. So 41% of those polled said they love it and they will buy it. But 43% said they love it and will not be buying it, which is an interesting contrast.
Honestly, that's actually what I voted for.
Yes. 9% said they don't like it and won't buy it. But 7%, and this is the interesting answer, said they don't like it, but they are going to buy it either for, a lot of them explained, for family members or just to try it out or to, you know, share it with somebody else.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I did choose that I love it but won't buy it because I think the concept is awesome and I want to recommend it to people who it's most relevant for. But it's not necessarily something for myself.
For me, I just don't have a place to put that stuff. Like, I just literally cannot store those Joy-Cons anywhere that would be discreet.
I feel like one of us is going to have to get one just so we can talk about it.
We'll see. I'm going to try to go down actually to the, they have a event in New York City where they're going to be trying, you know, displaying it for kids. And I'm going to try to go down with some little relatives of mine to see if I can get my hands on it at least there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, let's close out this show with our favorite final segment, the System Switch. JV, what game do you want to see brought over to Nintendo Switch?
So, if you guys don't know me already, I am a big mech fan, and I'm also a big Gundam fan, so I think it's pretty natural for me
So you're a big mech fan, and you're a big mech made out of a specific metal fan. Got it.
Yes, Gundanium. But I'm a big Gundam franchise fan, and I love the Gundam Versus games. I would love to see this game come out on the Nintendo Switch.
What kind of game is that?
So it is a 2 versus 2 arena fighting game where you and a partner control a Gundam or a robot in the franchise within a large arena, and you're fighting against another opponent. The mechanics are very tight. Each Gundam is represented well with all the abilities that you know from the show. Considering how off the wall each Gundam's capability is, it's really cool to mix and match with teammates. Yeah, and it's a ton of fun.
Are these from all the Gundam series, or are they from a specific one?
No, these are from all the Gundam series. So you can have the Gundam Virtue from 00 fighting against Gundam Wing, and fighting against the Quanta, Gundam Quanta, fighting against the Goof, fighting against the Zaku, fighting against the Sinanju, fighting against the Epion.
Okay.
It's awesome. And what I particularly love about this game is that it utilizes a point system for each robot you can pilot. So you might have a super overpowered character like the Epion and a really, less powerful Gundam like the GM1. If you kill the more overpowered one, that nets you more points or removes more points from the opponent's team than the smaller one. So the smaller one can die more often, and that allows for quite a bit of balance with a fighting system.
Interesting. Cool. Very cool. I actually picked a selection of options because they're all in the same genre.
Okay.
And this is because we're always talking in the forums. I mentioned often how I'm always looking for little chess games, and a bunch of people on the forum or in the Discord chat keep asking me to play Chess Ultra on the Switch itself. But I'm like, I always say, look, I need something more than just chess on an application that I'm going to pay like a full price game for, or even $20. I want something more than just chess itself in a Switch game, especially when there's a free apps out all over the place on the phone that have amazing features and even chess variants to play. So here are 3 options for variant chess games that have been out in various modes, that any one of which would be a great way to sate this desire to play chess, but in a different way. All right. First off, Chess 2, the sequel. This came out on Ouya, and it's on Steam, and it's made by a favorite game designer of mine. He usually focuses on the fighting game genre, but he brought a little bit of fighting game prediction and character selection to it, and that you pick different factions, and the faction you pick changes how all your chess pieces move, or certain abilities that certain pieces have, and they all function very differently. And he added a few other little rule changes. It's an interesting game, even though one of the matchups is kind of broken right now.
Right.
But a little bit of a tweaking, I think they could fix that. But that's one option. Next, For the Crown. For the Crown is a tabletop game. This is Dominion, the deck builder, mixed with chess. It's in a brilliant, awesome combination where you play basic deck building. You buy cards into your deck, but on the side you have a chessboard where it's just 2 kings to start. But on your turn, you can trash one of the cards you bought in order to turn it into a piece on the chessboard. So you have to kind of balance buying good cards that have either good abilities or give you ability to buy stuff, but eventually you have to trash them to have pieces capable of attacking your opponent. And there's all sorts of, they're non-standard chess pieces, ones that move in cool and different ways, or, there's different abilities to, maybe you can move a piece twice as long as it doesn't capture this turn, based on certain card abilities, all sorts of cool stuff. Really cool chess variant. Like I said, it's deck building plus chess. Cool. And finally, Regicide. This was actually a Warhammer 40K themed iPhone app. Also, it's online. It's on PC. I'm not sure if it was on Steam or not, but
yeah, it's on Steam.
Okay, so this was, again, it is a chess game, but you pick factions, and each faction you pick, whether you're this branch of the orcs or if you're these space marines, they have actions they take after they move, like maybe throwing a frag grenade and doing damage to units, suppressing fire, healing. Some can go stealth so they can't be targeted for a turn or two, things like that. Because you can just kill units with standard chess moves, but you can also kill them if you just do damage to them with their supplemental abilities as well. And it changes up the game dramatically, and it was actually pretty epic, even though the company that produced it really didn't support it, and it really messed up. Like I actually bought factions for this game. I was into it for a while, but they never updated, and it glitched out, and I lost the game. I lost all my in-game purchases, and they never restored them, and they just washed their hands of it, and I was really disappointed because I was very into this. It was a fun strategy, abstract combat game, but with the Warhammer characters, and it was pretty cool options there. All 3 of these would be fine, but that's what I'm looking for when I tell people I can't just buy a normal chess game on a system like Switch.
That makes sense. And I would definitely agree with you there. Those are some good picks, and I'd love to see that on the Switch.
Any one of those, guys. Anyone.
Yeah.
One day Nintendo's going to take one of our suggestions. I swear.
Oh, I hope so. Maybe someday.
All right, JV. I think that's a good show. So until next time, everybody.
Switch it up.
Thanks for listening. You can support the SwitchCast by visiting us at patreon.com/theswitchcast, and join the review crew by rating us and subscribing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Also, check out our Discord chat, where we have an enthusiastic bunch of Switch fans in a family-friendly environment. Also, join our Facebook group for daily discussion and quite a bit of activity towards the Switch itself.
You can also contact us directly via email at kc@theswitchcast.com and jv@theswitchcast.com. Talk to us on Twitter @theswitchcast.
Thank you, HeatleyBros, for the theme music. And check us out on our website at theswitchcast.com, where we will post all relevant links and show notes.
Promotional considerations provided by publishers in the form of review copies of games.
How loud can I get before the mic spikes? I can be pretty loud. Loud.